their IP ID field is chosen, let's say, with a very particular, in a very particular way, which is just a counter. Okay? So when a machine will talk to another machine, and this is only per pair of machines, the IP ID field will just be a counter that gets basically incremented every time a packet is sent out. Okay? This is quite a rational design choice because IP IDs have to be unique, and the best way to ensure that is to actually choose consecutive IDs until they wrap around. But of course, if you have different machines behind a NAT, and they all have a conversation with you, they will all have independent counters as their IP ID field. Okay? And by observing how many such independent counters there are, he basically is able to make a judgment as to how many machines there are actually behind these networks. It's a very nice paper, and it has pretty graphs showing how you can fit lines through these IP counters that you receive in order to actually make an estimate about how big a network is behind a NAT, for example. Okay? Again, this is quite sophisticated as an attack. I think Nmap is also using IP ID tricks to do lots of things like that. And also indirect port scannings and these things. So traffic analysis attacks like this are also nowadays getting more and more into tools that people can use. Now, this was all about looking at, on one side, traditional security protocols like OpenSSH and OpenSSL, or any variants of SSH and SSL. Then we really talked about doing a bit of network monitoring using traffic data. So far, so good. Another community with a long-standing interest in looking at traffic data and getting intelligence are the people who do intrusion detection. In particular, these days it's quite popular as a sport to control botnets, and these guys would like to have a way of detecting the botnets that are running, let's say, within a corporate network. And in particular, they care about detecting what they call stepping stones, which are machines that are used just as a relay to attack other machines in the network. Okay? And they have a very simplistic model of these machines, let's say. It's a compromised machine within your network, okay? That when basically it receives streams of traffic, it just redirects them somewhere else. So basically it's kind of a primitive anonymizer, shall we say. And there is a lot of literature on trying to detect these stepping stone machines, and the kind of common idea is that you have an intrusion detection system which sits on your gateway to your private network, and then it looks at streams of traffic coming in and streams of traffic coming out, and kind of correlates the patterns within them. And if it sees that consistently a stream of traffic coming out is the same as a stream of traffic coming in, just by its shape, not its content, okay, it says, maybe we have a relay in our network, maybe it's a compromised machine. Now, sometimes, of course, it's going to be legitimate activity, such as a secure shell connection being bounced back and forth and such things, but sometimes they actually catch intrusions this way. Now, this is the passive version when you just look and try to detect, but of course there is a slightly more active version where the gateway or the intrusion detection system disrupts slightly the timing of the streams coming in and tries to basically detect this watermark, okay, in the streams of traffic coming out. So this is an active attack which makes it much faster and much cheaper. Okay, so coming from traffic analysis of anonymous communications, I find some of their assumptions quite naive in that we can do better anonymization than this simple relaying. But it's interesting that their approach apparently still works in the naive cases. Now, we have talked a lot about traffic information, i.e. Alice talks to Bob at 8 o'clock for 10 minutes, or for 100 kilobytes if it is an email. But of course, as I said, these days we all go around with mobile phones and laptops that connect to Wi-Fi, and these days we also have a little Sputnik on us. And all that is giving out location information. It basically can tell base stations where we are. Now, this is a relatively new field, i.e. the field of trying to extract from this location information high-level intelligence. Okay? In particular, Pascual and al. Logged a lot of traffic at Hackers at Large, which was a hacker conference, and also at his home university in KTH. And he looked at the traffic and basically created models that could infer where people are going, which talks, which lectures they attended, and basically also relationships between people. And it is actually rather counterintuitive that your location is not just giving information about, of course, your location and the fact that you're in this lecture, but also about your relations to other people, okay? And the reason for that is because if I see you all the time being in the same cells or in the same room or sitting next to someone in particular, okay, and I see that happening again and again and again, it is highly unlikely that you have absolutely no relation to that person, okay? So if I see you in the morning sitting next to someone and then in another random talk in the evening, probably the probability is that you know each other and that you have, chatted with each other and, you're sitting together. If I see you together with someone on a Saturday night at about 8 or 9 o'clock, it's quite likely that you're friends, because people don't hang around for work or with random people on a Saturday evening. If I see you on, let's say, Saturday at 5 o'clock in your home location, both of you, probably you're sleeping together, okay? So it is not just where you are, it is also who you know and what relationships you have with other people that is leaked via location information. Intel Cambridge ran a similar experiment. They basically took lots of Bluetooth devices and made them record who they see. And again, they discovered a couple that had devices that could see each other all night long, which was not common knowledge in the lab. And MIT ran a similar project where they gave students 100 phones. And what is interesting about the reality mining project is that all the data is available online. You can send them an email and mine happily and see what you can find. Okay, now I talked about low-level information, breaking passwords, finding out about network topologies, and to some extent, okay, the relationship between people is higher level, but the stepping stone is still intrusion detection lower level. But I guess I don't have to convince you that the information about your communication is also leaking a lot of information about your higher self. What are your intentions? What are your beliefs? What is your job? What are your sexual preferences, your political views, and all these things? In particular, the field of sociology and peer-to-peer networking is kind of merging, okay? This idea that we had in 99 or 98 that, oh, people talk at random and we just have to talk at random and all that stuff is not quite true, and we know it now. Human networks have a very specific topology. It has a particular degree distribution that turns out to be a power law. If I have two friends, they are more likely to know each other than two random people. And in particular, human networks are navigable, meaning that it is actually quite easy to find someone else by relaying communication than a random topology. So we know that human networks have a very specific topology, and of course, traffic analysis can be used to infer that topology. Okay? And lots of people have caught on to that. In particular, there is a Dutch criminologist that has worked really closely to the Dutch police who said, using traffic analysis, I can tell you who to arrest in order to maximally disrupt drugs network, for example. Other people, like Nagaraya and Anderson in Cambridge University, looked at it from the point of view of disrupting, again, networks, and have found particular peer-to-peer architectures that try to protect against it. But what is really interesting is that it seems that this field is so mature in the closed communities of intelligence and law enforcement that it has 20 whole pages devoted to it in the newly published counterinsurgency doctrine manual of the US Army. Okay, this is not really where you expect to find sociology, yet Appendix B, which is 20 pages, is devoted on basically how to find out who's friends with whom and basically who to kill in order to better win your war. Now, I don't want to be overly negative about all this because, of course, traffic analysis techniques can also be used for good. Google PageRank is a good example, basically, of trying to infer where people would be navigating in order to give you pages of most interest. Advocato is a social network, and there are many more examples like this. Now, I don't want to focus too much on traffic analysis resistance because this is the good old field of anonymous communications. That Roger Dingledine has given a clear overview yesterday. So basically, there has been research going on into anonymous communications that try to hide the routing information since '81. Very much it was theoretical till the 90s, let's say, when the first kind of cryptographically strong remailers like Mixmaster were developed. And of course, when it comes to web anonymity, we have JAP, the Java Anonymous Proxy from Dresden University, and Tor that Roger presented yesterday. Relatively, in the last 5 years, we had a lot of research in this field, and we have created a lot of knowledge on how to build this system, and a lot more actually on how to attack them. So if you're going to present or start coding your anonymous communication system and you think it's great, do talk to me and Roger and other people who have worked in this field before, and we'll tell you, well, our opinion, I guess, about its strength. So, yeah, I'll not talk very much about all this. I'll just skip to conclusions. And before I actually reach the deep conclusions, I want to talk a bit about policy. Now, in Europe, and the US to some extent, we have this new piece of legislation about retaining all traffic data. Okay? And there is a clear connection to what I have been talking about all this time, which is that traffic data is really the kind of fuel that you're feeding into traffic analysis engines in order to get out results. Okay? And suddenly we have the European and national European and American legislator who says to all the communication providers, you have to keep all that data. Okay? You have to keep it for a certain amount of time, and you have to be able to give it to us for, the purpose of investigations and all these things. Okay? Now, what is the problem with that, of course? The problem is that this kind of policy introduces a systemic risk in the telecommunication networks we have. As I mentioned to you before, within the standard protocols that we're all using to communicate, there is actually no provision to protect against traffic analysis. All the traffic data is in clear, and now all the internet service providers and telco providers are actually mandated to keep it. Okay, so even if you said, oh, what is the probability that all this data is getting intercepted and used, suddenly now the probability is 100% by law. Okay? Now, of course, for the prevention of crime is a good idea, but covert communication is actually still possible, despite traffic analysis and despite basically all this traffic data retention. So what we have to do, I guess, in the next few years is to try to explain to the public at large and legislators the extent to which this data that is being retained can be used for attack. It can be used for attack at low levels. It can be used for attack at high levels. It can violate your privacy as much as your network security properties. Okay? And this has really been understated, and I think that if we had a much concerted effort in exposing that fact to the public and the legislators, we would have very different policies in place. Of course, the second issue is the whole peer-to-peer information warfare we've been observing. People try to pirate music, and that's great. And people try to prevent them from doing that, and that's their business too. So it's basically information warfare for real out there. Okay? And traffic analysis is really at the heart of it. Okay? Because on one side, the people who try to share try to not give a signature, not to be blocked, not to be detected, not to be identifiable. On the other side, of course, the people, and there are companies doing this business, who try to file suits against them, will try to detect when they're doing it, will try to filter them out if they're ISPs, and will try to identify them to sue them. Okay? So we have a huge arms race going on out there, and techniques are getting more and more sophisticated on both sides. And of course, it's a policy issue. Do we want this information warfare to be happening out there? Is that really what our information networks are for? And is basically protecting the music industry, which with its business models from, I don't know, 100 years ago, really worth, having this hostile environment in peer-to-peer networks? I mean, that's a policy decision that we have to make. And of course, privacy, I guess, and data protection are the ultimate question, okay? It is really not clear to people that who they talk to is sensitive information, and the techniques for mining this produce such high-quality results, okay, that no one really could just guess it, okay? Yet our definitions of data protection and what is sensitive data and all these things really don't take into account all these techniques. They say, oh, if in a form you're asked if you're a vegetarian or not, and you reply one way or the other, this is personal information. But you know what? What you have shopped in the supermarket is not really that sensitive, even though, you know, if it never really contains meat, it's pretty much clear that you're a vegetarian. So you can extract the same high-level information, yet they kind of come under completely different regimes.